The gavel's crack echoed through the courtroom like a thunderclap, but it wasn't the sound that made everyone fall silent, it was the look on the judge's face when he saw me. His eyes widened, his jaw slackened, and for a fleeting second, his hand trembled as though the ghost of his past had just stepped through those double doors. That ghost was me. At 6 to 9 years old, with silver hair pinned neatly beneath a hat and a cane tapping against the polished floor, I didn't look like the kind of woman who could make a judge lose his breath. To everyone else, I was just a frail grandmother, here to sit quietly while my own daughter and son-in-law tried to strip away the last thing I owned. But the judge knew better. He remembered. And though the courtroom was thick with whispers, only he and I understood the truth, that I carried a secret buried so deep, it could shatter lives and topple legacies. I hadn't wanted to come back here. God knows, I prayed I'd never have to. But betrayal has a way of dragging you back into the very fire you once escaped. And as I gripped the handle of my cane and met his stare, I could feel the past clawing its way back, demanding to be heard. That was the moment I realized, this trial wasn't just about property. It was about everything I had spent a lifetime running from. And if the truth came out, none of us, especially my daughter, would leave this courtroom the same. They think I'm old, fragile, easy to deceive. That's the mistake my daughter made when she plotted against me, and it's the mistake her husband made when he coached her into betrayal. But I wasn't always someone's grandmother. Before arthritis twisted my hands, before silver streaked my hair, I was a woman who knew how to survive, who had secrets powerful enough to destroy men far stronger than my son-in-law. And the judge, oh, he knows exactly what I mean. When I saw his face freeze that morning, I almost pitied him. Almost. Because I remembered the last time I stood in front of him, not as an old woman in pearls, but as a young firebrand who had witnessed something no one else dared to speak of. He thought those days were buried forever. He thought I was gone. But here I am. And this time, I'm not the one on trial. I sat in the cold, wooden bench as my daughter adjusted her blazer at the plaintiff's table. Her eyes flicked toward me only once, sharp, calculating, cold. My own daughter. Flesh of my flesh. And yet, she wore that look of contempt that only greed could carve into a person's face. Beside her, her husband leaned in, whispering something in her ear. His hand brushed hers, steadying her, encouraging her. A perfect performance of unity. If only the jury could see past their act. If only they knew the truth of what those two had plotted. I tightened my grip on my cane. Don't you dare tremble, Ruth, I told myself. Don't you let them see you weak. Case number 14B, the bailiff called. Plaintiff, Miriam Collins. Defendant, Ruth Collins. My name. My daughter's name. Spoken in the same breath, but with war between them. Then the judge walked in. And the air changed. He was older now, heavier around the middle, with deep creases in his face. But when his eyes landed on me, the mask slipped. His mouth parted as if he'd seen a ghost. His gavel paused midair, his knuckles whitening around it. My heart thudded against my ribs. I'd prepared for betrayal from my daughter, but not this, never this. Your Honor, the court clerk prompted, her voice breaking the silence. He blinked, straightened his robe, and cleared his throat. Yes, proceed. But his gaze kept darting back to me, as if he couldn't help himself. Miriam noticed. I saw her brows furrow, her lips twitch in irritation. She thought this was her stage, her shining moment to finally take what she believed was owed to her. But the judge's attention wasn't on her. It was on me. And that unsettled her. Good. Her lawyer rose, a slick man with slicker hair. He laid out the case like it was already decided, Miriam claiming I was unfit, unstable, unable to manage my own affairs. That my home, my savings, my dignity, should be placed in her control for my own good. For my own good. I wanted to laugh, but the sound caught in my throat like barbed wire. If only they knew. If only they knew who I really was. Mrs. Collins, the lawyer said finally, his voice patronizing. Would you say your health has declined in recent years? I raised my head slowly, meeting his gaze, then Miriam's. She smirked, already imagining my stammer, my hesitation, my surrender. But when I spoke, my voice was clear. Firm. I may be old, I said, letting the words slice through the silence, but I am not helpless. And I am certainly not forgetful. There are things I remember with perfect clarity, things this court might find enlightening. The judge shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His hand gripped the arm of his chair. Miriam frowned. Mother, what are you talking about? I leaned forward, my cane tapping against the floor like a drumbeat. I'm talking about the truth, Miriam. The truth you don't know, but he does. I turned my eyes to the judge, and in that moment, the whole courtroom followed my gaze. The judge's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally rasped out, Mrs. Collins, we will address only matters relevant to this case. But his voice shook. And I smiled. Because everyone in that room had just seen it, the fear in his eyes. And that was only the beginning. The silence in that courtroom was thick enough to choke on. My daughter shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her smug confidence thinning like fog in the sun. She could sense it, something deeper was happening here, something she hadn't prepared for. Her husband leaned in, whispering urgently, but she snapped at him under her breath. She didn't like losing control. She never had. Mrs. Collins, the opposing lawyer said, trying to recover the moment, please answer the question. Has your health? My health? I cut in sharply. My health is fine. What's not fine is this charade, my own child trying to strip me of everything I built. But perhaps we should let His Honor decide whether I'm fit to manage my affairs. My cane tapped once against the floor. I leaned forward, eyes locked on the judge. After all, he remembers just how capable I was, once upon a time. The judge's hand jerked. His pen slipped from his fingers, clattering loudly against the desk. Whispers rippled across the room. Your Honor, the clerk asked nervously. He cleared his throat, too late. The color had already drained from his face. Proceed, he muttered, though his voice was low and strained. Miriam's eyes darted between us, suspicion knitting her brow. Mother, she hissed, barely audible, what are you doing? I tilted my head at her, lips curving in the faintest of smiles. You think you know me, child. You think age has made me soft, forgetful, powerless. You have no idea who I really am. The lawyer pressed on, though his words wavered. Mrs. Collins, please refrain from irrelevant remarks. This is a matter of guardianship and property, not history. I interrupted again. My voice rose, steady but sharp, echoing in the courtroom. Funny, because history has a way of deciding who should and shouldn't have power. Isn't that right, Judge? His eyes snapped to mine, and for a heartbeat, the mask slipped again. I saw it, the same haunted recognition I'd seen the moment I walked in. Miriam slammed her hand on the table. Enough. Mother, stop playing games. What history? What is going on here? I turned my gaze to her slowly, deliberately. There are things you don't know about me, Miriam. Things I never wanted you to know. But if you force me to fight you here in this courtroom, then the truth will come out. All of it." The room held its breath. The judge shifted, tugging at his collar, sweat beading on his temple despite the cool air. "Mrs. Collins," his voice cracked. "I remind you, this court will not tolerate." But I didn't let him finish. "Do you remember the summer of '74? I asked, my tone quiet, but carrying like a gunshot. His gavel froze midair. The bailiff looked confused. The lawyer sputtered. Miriam's husband narrowed his eyes. But the judge, he looked as if I had just ripped open a grave right in front of him. Because he remembered. And now, so did I. The year I mentioned hung in the air like smoke. 1974. The courtroom shifted uneasily. A few jurors glanced at one another, as though trying to piece together why the date had made the judge's hand go slack. My daughter scoffed. 74? Mother, what are you babbling about? You weren't anyone back then. Just a housewife struggling to keep the lights on. You think dredging up some old story will. I turned my head toward her, and she stopped. I didn't even need to speak. My stare alone, steady, sharp, unflinching, reminded her that she knew nothing of the woman who raised her. Housewife, I repeated softly, almost to myself. Yes, that's what I wanted the world to believe. A quiet, ordinary life. The perfect disguise. The judge shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His knuckles were white where they gripped the armrest. You will confine your statements to this case, Mrs. Collins, he snapped suddenly, but his voice cracked like brittle glass. I smiled. A slow, knowing smile that made Miriam's lawyer lose his footing mid-step. Oh, but this is about the case, I said. My cane tapped against the floor in a slow rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Because you see, my daughter claims I'm unfit. She says my memory is fading, that my mind is fragile. Yet I remember everything down to the smell of cigar smoke in the judge's office that night in '74, the way his signature looked on a paper that should never have existed, and the names of the men who swore it would never see daylight. The judge flinched. A bead of sweat slid down his temple. Miriam stared at me, her face paling. Mother, what are you saying? Her husband cut in, desperate to control the damage. This is absurd. Your Honor, we object to these theatrics. This woman is clearly unstable. But I silenced him with a laugh. Low. Bitter. The kind of laugh that doesn't ask for permission. Unstable? I leaned forward. No. What's unstable is the truth you've all tried to bury for 50 years. The truth that I, an ordinary grandmother you thought would die quietly in her rocking chair, have carried like a loaded gun. The jury leaned in now. The whispers spread. Even the bailiff's hand brushed the butt of his holster, as though sensing danger where none was visible. And still, the judge avoided my eyes. But he couldn't avoid the past. Not forever. I lowered my voice, letting the silence stretch tight before I spoke again. You remember, don't you, Judge? You remember what we saw that summer, the night when everything changed. His face went ghostly pale. And in that instant, I knew he was terrified not of me, but of what I was about to say. Because one sentence, one name, one detail from that night could unravel everything he had built. And I was ready to speak it. The room held its breath. Even the fluorescent lights above seemed to hum quieter, waiting for me to speak. I rested both hands on my cane, steadying myself as if the weight of decades balanced on that piece of wood. In a way, it did. Summer of '74, I said, my voice low but carrying. The courthouse was smaller back then. No security cameras, No electronic records. Just dusty ledgers, locked drawers, and secrets whispered in darkened rooms. I was there that night, not by accident. I saw what you did, Judge. I saw who you protected, and who you destroyed. The judge's gavel trembled in his hand. Bang! He slammed it down once, too hard, and the sharp crack made Miriam jump. Mrs. Collins, he barked, but the command in his voice was gone. Fear threaded through every syllable. This court will not tolerate. I leaned forward, cutting him off with a single name. Robert Halvorsen. The judge froze. His knuckles turned bone-white around the gavel. Gasps rippled across the gallery. Some of the older faces stirred, recognition flickering. My daughter blinked, confused. Who is that? Who? Don't you dare say that name in my courtroom, the judge snarled, his mask cracking wide open. But the damage was already done. I smiled faintly. So you do remember. Miriam looked from me to the judge, her voice rising. What's going on here? Who is Robert Halvorsen? What does this have to do with my case? Her husband tried to tug her arm, hissing, "Don't push it," but she shook him off, panic flashing in her eyes. This wasn't the script she had prepared for. She wanted me humiliated, broken, declared incompetent. Instead, I had turned the spotlight on a man who was supposed to be untouchable. The jury leaned forward now, hungry, sensing the fracture. I let the silence stretch, let the weight of that name hang heavy in the air. Then I spoke again, softer this time, forcing everyone to lean in. Robert Halvorsen was never supposed to walk free. And yet, thanks to the judge, he did. I was there. I saw the signatures, the money exchanged, the files that vanished. I was the invisible witness they never counted on. The judge slammed the gavel again. Bang! Bang! This is out of order, he thundered. Bailiff. But the bailiff hesitated, caught between duty and curiosity. His eyes flicked nervously between me and the trembling man on the bench. I straightened my spine, letting every ounce of age melt away in that moment. You wanted me weak, Miriam. You wanted me voiceless. But look around, your plan is crumbling before your eyes. Because I am not just your mother. I am the one who knows the truth. Her face blanched. Mother, what truth? I let the question hang unanswered, the tension gnawing at every soul in the room. Because the real truth, the full truth, was still waiting. And when I spoke it, not even the judge's robe would shield him. The name Robert Halvorsen tasted bitter on my tongue, even after 50 years. But it was time to let it out. I fixed my eyes on the judge. You remember who he was. Everyone in this county does, though most pretend they've forgotten. The wealthy businessman. The philanthropist. The man who owned half the land and thought he owned the people too. The jurors shifted. Some of the older ones nodded faintly, remembering. Halvorsen's shadow had been long. But behind the polished smile, I continued, he was a monster. Men like him always are. He bribed, he coerced, he destroyed anyone who stood in his way. And when the law finally caught up to him, when the evidence stacked too high to ignore, it should have been the end. I let my gaze slice toward the bench. But it wasn't, was it, Judge? His throat bobbed, but no words came out. My daughter leaned forward, confused but shaken. What does this have to do with you, Mother? What are you saying? I turned slowly toward her, my voice as sharp as broken glass. I'm saying your honorable judge made sure Halvorsen never saw a prison cell. I watched the files disappear. I saw the witnesses silenced. And I remember the night the verdict was handed down when justice was traded for a price. Gasps rippled again. A murmur rose from the back of the courtroom. The judge slammed his gavel so hard the handle cracked. Enough. Mrs. Collins, you will not drag this court into my lies. I cut him off. Careful, Judge. If I'm lying, why does your hand shake every time I speak his name? His hand trembled visibly. The jurors saw it. The gallery saw it. My daughter saw it, and for the first time, doubt flickered in her eyes. I pressed on. You think age has dulled my memory, Miriam. But I remember the ledger with Halvorson's payments. I remember the hidden drawer in the clerk's office. I remember the woman who tried to testify, who disappeared before she ever made it to the stand. The room went still. Her name, I whispered, letting the words pierce the silence, was Eleanor Marks. The judge flinched as if I'd struck him. And suddenly, the whispers exploded, some older faces in the crowd covering their mouths, others muttering furiously. Because Eleanor Marks had been a schoolteacher. Beloved. Young. And her disappearance had never been solved. I tapped my cane once on the floor, steady and deliberate. I was there that night. I heard her cries. And I saw the man who closed the file and buried her fate. The judge's eyes glistened, his composure unraveling thread by thread. Mother, Miriam's voice was trembling now. Are you saying he was? I didn't answer. Not yet. Because the final truth, the one that would shatter everything, was still in my pocket, waiting like a blade I wasn't ready to unsheath. Not yet. But soon. The courtroom had become a storm. Whispers swelled into sharp voices. The jurors leaned forward, some wide-eyed, some skeptical, but none indifferent. Even the bailiff shifted uneasily, his hand grazing his holster like instinct told him the ground was about to split. The judge pounded his gavel again and again, but the cracks in his mask were plain for all to see. Order. I demand order in this court. But no one was listening. My daughter slammed her palm on the desk. Mother, this is insane. You're talking about ghosts and rumors, none of this has anything to do with our case. Her husband grabbed her wrist, trying to calm her, but she shook him off violently. Her eyes darted between me and the judge, panic rising like a tide. Why are you both acting like you know something I don't? What is happening here? I straightened, letting my cane rest across my lap like a staff of judgment. What's happening, Miriam, is that truth has claws. And once it starts scratching its way out, there's no burying it again. She paled. Stop it. Please. Just stop. The judge's face hardened, though his voice betrayed him. Bailiff, remove her from this courtroom. Immediately. The bailiff hesitated. His eyes flicked to the jury, then back to me. He didn't move. Not because he respected me, but because he, too, wanted to hear what I was about to say. Don't you dare, the judge barked, his voice cracking. And that was when I let it slip. Just a sliver. Enough to make the air grow cold. You want to silence me? I asked softly. You should have done it 50 years ago. You should have silenced me the night I followed Eleanor Marks into that building. A hush swept through the courtroom. The judge froze. His mouth opened, then closed again. His eyes, haunted, wide, met mine with a terror he couldn't hide. Miriam's breath caught. Wait, you knew her? Eleanor Marks. You never told me. My grip tightened on the cane. My knuckles whitened. She wasn't just a name in a file, Miriam. She was flesh and blood. She was real. And when the world turned its back on her, I stood in the shadows and watched. I watched the deal. I watched her fate sealed by men in robes and men in suits. The whispers surged again, sharper this time. Someone in the gallery muttered, "Dear God." Another swore under his breath. The judge's face was drenched in sweat now. He slammed the gavel so hard the cracked handle finally snapped. The head of the gavel clattered onto the floor. "That's enough," he roared, but his voice was no longer the voice of authority. It was the voice of a man cornered. And everyone could see it. I leaned forward, lowering my voice to a chilling whisper. "The real question isn't whether I knew Eleanor Marks. It's why you were so desperate to make the world forget her." The judge's eyes widened. His lips trembled. And in that moment, everyone in the courtroom knew there was more to come. Much more. I could feel the weight of every eye in that courtroom pressing down on me. They were waiting for my next word, my next breath, my next revelation. And the judge knew it. His hands clutched the bench as though it might save him from drowning. My daughter broke the silence first, her voice trembling. "Mother, tell me you're lying. Tell me this is just some story." I looked at her, really looked at her. My daughter, who thought she knew me. Who thought age had stripped me of my strength. Who thought she could betray me and walk away unscathed. "You want the truth, Miriam?" My voice was steady, razor sharp. "Here it is. Eleanor Marks wasn't just a witness. She was my friend. My dearest friend. We were both young mothers then, scraping by, surviving however we could. She trusted me with her fears, and with the evidence she had against Robert Halvorsen." Gasps swept through the room like wind through dry grass. The judge's head jerked up, panic flashing in his eyes. I continued, relentless. "Eleanor came to me the night before she was supposed to testify. She was terrified. She knew the threats were real. But she also knew the truth mattered more. She pressed those papers into my hands, records, names, transactions, and she said, 'If something happens to me, promise me you'll never let them bury this.'" My daughter covered her mouth. "Oh my God." The gallery erupted in whispers, questions flying like sparks. The judge slammed what was left of his gavel against the desk, but it made only a hollow, broken sound. "Mrs. Collins, I order you to stop." "Order me all you want," I cut in, my voice rising. "But you can't erase what I saw. You can't erase the sound of Eleanor's scream that night when she never came home. And you can't erase the look on your face, Judge, when you signed the order that sealed Halvorsen's freedom." The room froze. Even the bailiff's jaw tightened. The jury leaned forward, some with eyes wide, some with hands covering their mouths. The judge was shaking outright now, his robes damp with sweat. Miriam's husband muttered, "This is madness, she's trying to derail the whole proceeding." But Miriam turned on him, her voice sharp with panic. "Shut up. Don't you see what's happening? She's telling the truth." I let the silence stretch before I spoke again, softer now, but with steel beneath it. "I kept my promise to Eleanor. I kept the evidence hidden all these years. I prayed I'd never have to use it. But betrayal has a way of dragging the past back into the light." I fixed my eyes on the judge. "And today, in this courtroom, I am ready to finish what she started." The judge's face went ashen. His lips parted, but no sound came. And in that moment, everyone knew this was no longer about guardianship, or property, or whether I was fit to manage my life. This was about justice. The kind that doesn't fade with time. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small, worn folder. The leather was cracked, the edges frayed, but inside lay every record Eleanor had trusted me with: the ledger pages, the hidden receipts, the notes in her handwriting. The courtroom went silent. My daughter's eyes widened in horror. Her husband paled. The judge's hand trembled as he realized the magnitude of what I was holding. "This," I said, holding the folder aloft, "is everything. Proof of bribery, coercion, and corruption. Proof that Robert Halvorsen walked free because someone in this room, someone sworn to uphold justice, chose to protect him instead of the law." The judge swallowed hard, his knuckles white on the bench. He tried to speak, but I cut him off. "Don't bother denying it," I said, my voice calm, cold, and final. "I have the documents. I have the witnesses who will testify. And I have the memory that refuses to fade." Miriam's knees buckled. She sat down abruptly, covering her face. "Mother, no, you can't." "Oh, I can," I said, tapping my cane against the floor for emphasis. "Because you betrayed me. You wanted my life, my property, my dignity. You thought I would sit quietly while you rewrote the story of my life. But I am Ruth Collins, and I do not forgive." A murmur ran through the jury. Even the bailiff stared at me, slack-jawed. I opened the folder and laid it on the judge's bench. "Take a look. Every signature. Every transaction. Every act hidden in plain sight. The truth you tried to bury is now here." The judge looked down at the papers, his hands trembling. I could see the memories flooding back, the panic, the fear, the nights of hiding evidence. And I could see something else too, guilt. The kind that doesn't fade, no matter how much time passes. Miriam's husband reached for the folder, but I shook my head. "No. This is not for you. This is for the court. For justice. For Eleanor. And for me." My daughter's face went pale, realization dawning too late. She had thought she could outsmart me. She had thought I was fragile, that I was a grandmother too old to fight back. She was wrong. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes locked on the judge. "Now, Your Honor, the question isn't whether I am fit to manage my life. The question is whether you are fit to continue hiding the truth. And I think we all know the answer." The gallery erupted into whispers, the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Some jurors whispered to one another, others gawked openly. My daughter shrank in her seat, powerless. And for the first time in decades, I felt the power that had always been mine, quiet, patient, unstoppable, finally surge through me. Because the truth was out. And nothing in that room would ever be the same again. The courtroom was tense, every eye glued to the papers I had laid bare. The air was thick with fear, anticipation, and the taste of inevitability. My daughter's shoulders shook, her husband muttering uselessly beside her. The judge stared at the folder, pale and trembling, as if the ghosts of his past had risen to claim him. I leaned on my cane, letting the moment stretch. I had waited 50 years for this, 50 years to balance the scales that had been tipped by greed, fear, and cowardice. "Your Honor," I said, my voice calm but cutting through the room like a blade, "you thought time had erased the consequences of your actions. You thought Eleanor Mark's disappearance would stay buried, that her evidence would vanish along with her. But here it is." The judge's lips parted, but no sound came. His eyes darted to my daughter, as though begging for an escape that didn't exist. I stepped closer to the bench. "Do you remember the night she disappeared?" I whispered, low enough for only him to hear. "You didn't just cover for Halvorsen. You made sure no one ever traced it back to you. And yet, here I am." His hand shook as he reached for the folder, but I stopped him with a glance. "Not yet. The court deserves to see this unfold properly." I turned to the jury. Eleanor Marks trusted me to protect the truth. And I have. Every ledger, every note, every witness ready to testify. And now, the The person who betrayed that trust is sitting right here, thinking their past is hidden. Miriam's eyes widened in horror. Mother, what are you doing? I'm doing what you never thought I could, I said, my voice rising with authority. I am not powerless. I am not weak. And I am not the woman you tried to cheat. Then I delivered the final piece. My gaze locked on the judge. There's one more thing you should know, Your Honor. Eleanor Marks, she wasn't just my friend. She was my sister. My blood. And the day she died because of your cowardice, I swore I would make those responsible pay. The room gasped. My daughter's jaw fell open. Her husband's face drained of color. The judge froze, his gavel slipping from his trembling hands. I leaned forward, cane tapping decisively. Do you remember me now? Not the grandmother in pearls, but the woman who stood before you 50 years ago, who watched the corruption, who vowed to protect her family's honor? You thought I was gone. But I never left. I've been waiting for this day. The jury erupted in whispers, the gallery buzzing. The judge could only stare, paralyzed, realizing that every decision he had made in his career, the silences, the cover-ups, the compromises, was about to be exposed. I let the weight of the moment settle. Your Honor, my daughter thought she could take what's mine. She thought she could betray her own blood without consequence. But she underestimated me. And you, I said, voice like steel, you underestimated the price of your silence. I dropped the folder on the bench with a thud. The sound reverberated like a gavel striking the final judgment. Case dismissed, I said, softly, but with the absolute authority of someone who had finally claimed what was rightfully hers. My daughter sank into her seat, defeated. Her husband looked ready to flee. The judge slumped, defeated, a man finally confronted by the truth he had tried to bury. And me. I walked out of that courtroom not just as a grandmother, but as the woman Eleanor Marks had trusted, the woman I had always been, and the woman no one ever would underestimate again. Justice had waited 50 years. And it was mine.